In the history of American wealth, we're used to hearing about old money fortunes built over generations. The Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Astors, but what happens when a fortune isn't a dynasty? What happens when it's forged by one man's genius in the modern era, only to evaporate within his own lifetime? This is a different kind of story. It's not about the slow decay of an empire over a century. It's about a lightning-fast creation and an equally rapid implosion. In the 1980s, one man, John Kluge, was richer than almost anyone on the planet. For a time, he was the richest man in America, with a peak net worth of an estimated $5.2 billion in 1989. So how did this modern media mogul, a man who built a multi-billion-dollar empire from the ground up, see it all seemingly vanish? This is the story of how one of the great fortunes of the 20th century was wiped out by a disastrous divorce and a series of catastrophic financial bets. It's a cautionary tale about the dizzying heights of wealth and the brutal reality of its loss. To understand the fall of the House of Kluge, you have to understand the man who built it. John Werner Kluge wasn't born into money. His life was the American dream, a story so classic it could have been ripped from an old Hollywood script. Born in Germany in 1914, his father was killed in World War I. In 1922, at 8 years old, John arrived in the United States with his mother and stepfather. They settled in Detroit, but his home life was tough. His stepfather wanted John to join the family's small contracting business and looked down on education. John, however, was driven by a fierce ambition to learn and to become someone new. He left home at just 14, determined to finish his schooling. He worked relentlessly, not just on his studies, but on losing his German accent, molding himself into the man he envisioned. His hard work landed him a scholarship to Columbia University, an opportunity he later said changed his life. He studied economics, but he said his real education came from playing poker. There, he sharpened the skills that would define his career, an incredible ability to read people, calculate risk, and know exactly when to hold 'em and when to fold 'em. After graduating and serving in U.S. Army intelligence during World War II, Kluge jumped into business. His first ventures were modest. He started a small paper company, and in 1946, he scraped together his savings and some investors' money to launch his first radio station, WGAY, in Maryland. This was his foot in the door to an industry he would one day dominate. But Kluge wasn't really a broadcaster, he was a deal maker. As he put it, he was a businessman on the prowl for a good opportunity. His mantra was ruthless but effective. Buy and build, and make money and minimize taxes. He had a gift for spotting undervalued assets that others ignored. He bought and sold everything from food brokerages to advertising firms, with each deal padding his wallet and sharpening his instincts. By 37, John Kluge was already a millionaire, but his biggest move was yet to come. In the mid-1950s, American television was dominated by the big three networks, NBC, CBS, and ABC. John Kluge saw an opportunity in the scraps they left behind. He began buying up shares in the Metropolitan Broadcasting Corporation, what was left of the failed Dumont television network. To most, Dumont was a footnote. To Kluge, its two remaining independent stations in New York and Washington, D.C. were the seeds of an empire. By 1958, he had taken control for about $6 million. What he did next was a masterclass in corporate expansion. Instead of trying to compete with the big networks, he went after independent stations in major cities across the country, renaming the company Metro Media in 1961. His strategy was simple, but it was absolutely brilliant. He knew content was king, but he also knew he didn't have to make it all himself. He filled his station's schedules with reruns of popular sitcoms, old movies, and syndicated shows. While the networks chased primetime glory, Kluge was getting rich off the long tail of entertainment. He used the massive cash flow from his profitable stations to diversify like a man possessed. Soon, the Metro Media name was everywhere. Kluge bought the Foster and Kleiser outdoor advertising firm, creating a national powerhouse of billboards. He purchased the iconic Harlem Globetrotters and the Ice Capotes. He owned music publishing companies, direct mail businesses, and even Playbill magazine. His production company syndicated hit shows like The Merv Griffin Show. By the early 1980s, Metro Media was a behemoth. It owned TV stations in 7 of the top 10 U.S. markets, a portfolio second only to the networks themselves. Kluge was famously frugal in his personal life, but a shark in business, borrowing huge sums to buy premium assets he knew he could make more valuable. Then came his masterstroke. In 1984, unhappy with Metro Media's stock price, Kluge took the company private in a massive $1.6 billion leveraged buyout, a move that put him deep into personal debt. It was a colossal gamble, but he wasn't just taking the company private, he was getting it ready for the sale of a lifetime. In 1986, he made his move. He sold the Metro Media television stations to a rising mogul named Rupert Murdoch for around $2 billion. These stations became the foundation of the Fox television network, changing American media forever. That sale, combined with his early and brilliant investments in cellular technology, launched John Kluge into the stratosphere. Starting in 1987, Forbes magazine named him the richest man in America. He seemed untouchable. While John Kluge was building his empire, his personal life was a blur of glamour and high society. In 1981, he married his third wife, Patricia, a vibrant and ambitious former model 35 years his junior. They became a yagse, power couple, living an extravagant life that revolved around Albemarle, their breathtaking 7,378-acre estate in the Virginia countryside. The centerpiece was a 45-room neo-Georgian mansion, a modern-day palace designed to host royalty and celebrities. It was a world of helipads, stunning gardens, and opulent parties. In 1984, the couple adopted a son, John Kluge Jr. Life at Albemarle was the physical proof of Kluge's immense success, a kingdom built by sheer force of will. But behind the gilded doors, the marriage was falling apart. After 9 years, John and Patricia decided to divorce. Finalized in 1990, the split wasn't just a private matter, it was a financial earthquake. John Kluge was at the absolute peak of his wealth, and the divorce settlement was monumental. Patricia Kluge walked away with a fortune. While the exact terms were private, she received the crown jewel, the entire Albemarle estate. The house, the priceless art and antiques, the sprawling land, it was all hers, an asset valued at an estimated $100 million. At the time, it was one of the largest divorce settlements in history. For John, the financial hit was significant, but manageable. He had already cashed out of his biggest assets and was busy reinvesting. But the divorce marked a critical turning point. It wasn't just a loss of capital. It was the transfer of a monumental and monumentally expensive asset into his ex-wife's hands. Patricia was no longer just a socialite. She was now the owner of a grand estate and a 9-figure fortune. And this moment, which should have been the start of a new, independent life for her, was actually the first seed of the family's financial ruin. The empire was about to face its greatest threat, not from a corporate rival, but from the fallout of a broken marriage. With the keys to Albemarle and a vast fortune, what would Patricia Kluge do next? She didn't choose quiet retirement. Instead, she embarked on a project of breathtaking ambition. She would create a world-class American winery on the rolling hills of her Virginia property. And this wasn't going to be some small hobby. The Kluge Estate Winery and Vineyard opened in 1999, and from day one, no expense was spared. Patricia was determined to create the best, buying top-of-the-line European equipment and hiring famous consultants. The winery quickly earned praise. Its sparkling wine was even served at Chelsea Clinton's wedding. But ambition on this scale cost an astronomical amount of money. The divorce settlement, as huge as it was, started to disappear. Patricia poured millions into the winery, but it wasn't enough. To fund a massive expansion, she started taking on debt, a lot of it. She took out a $22.5 million mortgage on the Albemarle mansion and borrowed another $39 million from Farm Credit of Virginia. Then she doubled down, borrowing another $12 million to launch a luxury real estate development next to the winery called Vineyard Estates. It was the peak of her ambition, a luxury lifestyle community built around her celebrated winery. And then in 2008, the world fell apart. The global financial crisis hit, and the markets for luxury homes and expensive wine collapsed overnight. The timing couldn't have been worse. The Vineyard Estates project failed to attract a single buyer. At the winery, things were just as bad. Patricia was producing 30,000 cases of wine a year, but could suddenly only sell about a third of it, with the business reportedly losing $500,000 a month. The debt became a death sentence. In November 2008, the loan from Farm Credit went into default. Desperate for cash, Patricia put Albemarle on the market for an audacious $100 million in 2009. There were no takers. The price was slashed to $48 million, then $24 million. Still, nothing. The fall was gaining terrifying speed. She held a massive auction, selling off personal treasures, jewelry, furniture, and art, raising over $15 million. But it was just a drop in an ocean of debt. The end came swiftly. In late 2010, Farm Credit foreclosed on the winery. In early 2011, Bank of America seized Albemarle House. Finally, in July 2011, Patricia Kluge, the woman who had received one of the largest divorce settlements in history, filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The filings told the brutal story. She listed liabilities of $47.5 million against assets of just $2.6 million. The dream had crashed, leaving behind a wreckage of debt and foreclosure. The collapse of Patricia's fortune became a public spectacle, and the foreclosure auctions drew a strange mix of gawkers, developers, and one very famous real estate mogul, Donald Trump. A longtime friend of the Kluges, Trump saw an opportunity in the ruins. What followed was a masterclass in opportunistic buying. First, the winery went up for auction. In April 2011, Trump bought the bulk of the estate, over 700 acres, the winery, and the labels, for just $6.2 million, a fraction of what Patricia had poured into it. But Trump wasn't finished. The magnificent Albemarle House was now owned by Bank of America. Trump employed a ruthless tactic. He bought the 200-plus acres of land directly in front of the mansion, effectively holding its pristine views hostage. This move forced the bank's hand, and Trump eventually acquired Albemarle House as well, completing his takeover of the entire former Kluge kingdom. In a final surreal twist, Patricia Kluge and her husband went to work for the new owner. Trump, who admitted he was more interested in the real estate than the wine, hired Patricia to help manage the very vineyard she had created and lost. The Kluge Estate Winery was officially rebranded as Trump Winery. The woman who once reigned as queen of the estate was now an employee. While Patricia's fortune imploded, what happened to the man who started it all? John Kluge passed away in September 2010 at the age of 95, just as the final act of this financial drama was unfolding. He had lived to see his crowning as America's richest man, but he also witnessed the beginning of the end for the fortune he had passed on. John Kluge's own later years were a study in contrasts. While some of his later investments, like the Bennigan's and Ponderosa steakhouse chains, ended in bankruptcy, he preserved his core fortune until his death. But his ultimate legacy wasn't in business, it was in philanthropy. Remembering the scholarship that had changed his life, Kluge became one of the great philanthropists of his time. He gave prodigiously, donating over $510 million to his alma mater, Columbia University, including a single $400 million pledge in 2007, almost all of it for student financial aid. He also gave a $60 million gift to create the John W. Kluge Center at the Library of Congress, which awards a $1 million prize for lifetime achievement in the humanities. This is the great paradox of the Kluge story. The patriarch, an immigrant who built a staggering fortune from nothing, spent the end of his life giving it away in a structured, enduring manner. Meanwhile, the massive piece of that same fortune that he passed to his ex-wife was wiped out on a single, ill-timed bet. The story of the Kluge family fortune isn't your typical riches-to-rags tale. It's a uniquely modern tragedy of wealth. Unlike old money dynasties that faded over generations, the Kluge empire was built and broken with breathtaking speed. It shows that even a billion-dollar fortune is fragile, vulnerable not just to markets, but to the very human dramas of divorce, ambition, and hubris. John Kluge was a genius of timing. He knew when to get into an industry and, more importantly, when to get out, selling his TV empire at its absolute peak. But that Midas touch didn't extend to the wealth he passed on through his divorce. Patricia Kluge's story is its own cautionary tale. Her vision for the winery was bold, but she pursued it with reckless financial abandon. She broke a fundamental rule of wealth preservation. She fell in love with a single illiquid asset and leveraged everything she had against it. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, she had no firewall and no escape. The very dream she poured her fortune into became the instrument of its destruction. In the end, two legacies remain. One is the enduring philanthropic footprint of John Kluge, a legacy of giving that will last for generations. The other is the ghost of a lost fortune in the Virginia hills, a story of a magnificent estate and a failed winery that stands as a stark reminder of how quickly a modern fortune can be made, and how much more quickly it can be lost. If you found this story of fortune and failure fascinating, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next video. And let us know in the comments, what do you think was the single biggest mistake that led to this fortune's downfall? We read all your comments. Thanks for watching.